was a senator, I knew him because he was working at Chuck Schumer's office. He did 4 years over there. And eventually when I became a senator, since he's a constituent, lives in my district, I wanted to see if I could get him on board. And ultimately he did, so he's become my Director of Community Affairs, and he told me this is something that he wanted to do. He saw this not only as an opportunity, but as an obligation. As somebody who's from the Bronx, who's committed to public service, he wanted to throw his hat in the ring. So without further ado, I introduce to you Victor Pichardo.
Thank you, everyone. I hope everybody can hear me. Again, I appreciate your time that you're coming down here and just hearing myself, the senator, and Ritchie out. The reason why I decided to run for the state assembly right now is because we sort of have this revolving door of elected officials, unfortunately. You know, let me put it this way. The senator's last three predecessors, one is just started to serve time, one is about finishing his term in jail, and another one is served time back in the early 90s because of corruption and embezzlement. The fact of the matter is that cycle hasn't stopped, and that needs to stop. We need a new breed, a new generation of leadership in the Bronx, folks who've grown up in this particular area and are sick and tired of having our elected officials basically come into the door, knock on our doors, ask for their support with a nice smile and all these promises, and then eventually a couple years later they're let out of the courthouse in handcuffs because of something that they did. That needs to stop. And you know, with Ritchie as a partner in the city council and myself in the state assembly, as well as Senator Rivera in Albany, we will make sure that we bring back the novel concept of public service. And the fact of the matter is that elected officials are beholden to the community that they serve and they represent. The fact of the matter is that your taxpayer dollars go into the salaries of, has gone always into the salaries of myself, because I've only worked in basically government my entire professional career, as well as Senator Rivera as your current senator, and Ritchie Torres as his capacity working for Councilmember Vaca, as well as hopefully your new city council member in the 15th council district. We work for you. You hold us accountable. We are supposed to have your issues and have your concerns and make sure that there's an advocate in whatever level of government advocating for you. Because again, at the end of the day, it's your taxpayer dollars that pay our salaries, that give us the resource to have offices, and we should make sure that our offices are conduits and resource centers for the community. Also, if there's a concern that comes up in your personal lives that we can be helpful with, that is what we're here to do. So I'm happy to answer any questions about myself. And again, thank you so much for your time. I know I've knocked on a lot of your doors at some point and introduced myself with Mr. Matias. And again, I want to thank Mr. Matias, who's hiding out in the background, just observing, for putting this together and helping us organize this event. So I'll be around, and I just want to introduce, hopefully, my soon-to-be colleague in the city council, Ritchie Torres, nice young man who has done a lot of good work, especially in dealing with stuff with housing in the city council level, and this is sort of his wheelhouse, and I'll lean on Ritchie as well to learn a lot more about issues of housing, because we could always edify each other and the stuff that we want to do. So Ritchie Torres,
and if I may,
yes,
I will give you applause. But as far as this gentleman, and I want you to know who it is that you have in front of you. Now, I live in a rent-stabilized apartment, been living in one most of the time that I've been here in New York. Now, this gentleman lives with his folks still, who have gone through Section 8, have had all sorts of issues. Also, this gentleman, there was a recent stories in the paper in which somebody attacked him because he was living in an apartment for low-income people. And then when they just did a little bit of research, they found out that he had averaged about $20,000 a year in the last 3 years. So in other words, this is a gentleman, and this is the reason why I'm very strongly supporting him. I think that because of the experiences that he has, he's also born and raised in the Bronx. Because of the experiences that he is more than qualified to be representative of the folks that we have in our district. And so without further ado, Mr. Ritchie Torres. Ritchie.
Yeah. I'm Ritchie Torres. I'm running to be your council member. And as the senator pointed out, I've been attacked for essentially being poor, for being a low-income individual living in low-income housing. But I feel there's a real desire out there, and tell me if I'm wrong, to vote for candidates who are living your struggles, who knows what it's like to live in public housing as I do, living in slum conditions. Now, I'm ready to be your council member, and I want to ask you a few questions. When was the last time you had your New York City council member meet with you here? One at a time. Raise your hand. Don't rush. No rush. When was the last time you had your state assembly member here?
Oh! Never.
How many of you even know the names of either your council member or your state assembly member?
No.
Right? So we have a long history of elected officials who either have been scandalous or corrupt or at best have failed to show up. We don't know their names, we've never seen their faces, we've never heard their voices. They're nowhere to be found. They're missing in action.
It's true.
And Victor and I, and under the leadership of Senator Gustavo Rivera, we're here to say that changes today.
Right.
I suspect you've never seen a candidate for the city council and a candidate for the assembly and a New York State senator meet with the tenants here today. You know, we live in neighborhoods that have unemployment rates above 20%. I remember organizing in a public housing development where a senior citizen had been murdered outside her own home. She was bludgeoned to death in broad daylight. So there are concerns about maintenance and there are concerns about safety, and the stakes are too high to have elected officials who fail even to show up. You know, we're not miracle workers. We can't pluck magic wands out of thin air and solve every problem that affects your building. But Victor and I will work our heart out to try, and that should count for something. So we're here to address your concerns. I know there are concerns about safety. You know, one of the benefits of being in the city council is that you have member riders. You can allocate dollars for new cameras, and cameras can prevent violence and crime. I feel like there are 4 elements to public safety in public housing: cameras, intercoms, a resident watch program, because the residents need to be the eyes and ears in their own building, and 4 is lighting. I can't tell you the number of housing developments where most of the lights are not working. You call the CCC number and no one shows up to ever make these repairs. You have complaints being falsely closed in the system. You have NYCHA taking 2 years to even plaster your apartment. You know, if you call CCC, NYCHA never follows up with an inspection. And even when it follows up with an inspection, it never follows up with a repair. And I've lived in public housing most of my life. I know what it's like to go through the bureaucracy of NYCHA. NYCHA, in many ways, can be considered the worst slumlord in New York City. So we are here to, so I think it's important to have someone who has been there, has done that, who knows the struggles in your life, and is ready to advocate for you. And I think Senator Rivera, future Assembly Member Pichardo, and hopefully future Council Member Ritchie Torres will join in partnership. We can't do it by ourselves. We have to partner together at every level of government. But even the 3 of us can't do it by ourselves. We need the community to support us. And that's the basic point I want to leave with all of you. But we're here to answer whatever questions you have and to show that we're accountable to you.
And also, actually, Richie, before I want to make sure that this is mentioned. Richie and I, we went door knocking at a development at Twin Parks, and we walked into the apartment of a constituent and a tenant, and she was complaining that NYCHA, you know, they said that they called her, and she's booked for repairs in February of 2017. What year is it? Just out of curiosity, right now.
13.
And it's just to simply paint and plaster a wall. So 4 years to come and paint and plaster a wall.
Wow.
So that's incredible. That is unacceptable. And as a trio of elected officials, we will push NYCHA to make sure that repair issues are addressed in actual timely manner, not in 4 or 5 years. So, but anyway.
In fact, I mean, I know NYCHA because I've dealt with it. I think I can fair to say that your state senator, and if Victor's elected, your future assembly member, if I'm elected, we will ask the higher-ups of NYCHA to come to your development and meet with you and show that they're accountable to you. I think we should ask Carlos LaBoy, who's the Executive Vice President of Operations. He oversees every superintendent and every property manager throughout the city. We will ask him to come to your development and to address whatever issues you have. We will have 3 elected officials at every level of government ask the higher-ups of NYCHA to answer whatever concerns you have. And I want to point out one more thing. There's one thing that Victor and I have in common, no offense, Senator, is we're young men.
He's the old man? I'm the old man city.
We have no connections to the scandals and the failures of the past. You know, we are ready to represent a new generation of leadership. And all of you know we have a crisis of young men in our society. There are too many young men who live in this development, who don't have jobs, who dropped out of school, who have no community centers. There's a crisis of disconnected youth in our society, and Victor and I hope to represent an inspiration to those, to set an example for those young men, and to be spokesperson for those young men at the city and state level. And that's one point that I feel that should never be forgotten. But we're ready to answer whatever questions you have.